Yes, welcome everyone. So this is the School of Video Game Audio Discord, and so what we do in these sort of segments, Q&A segments, is to bring back a grad of ours that's doing really well, and someone that we can basically pick their brain and ask them all sorts of great questions about things that could be helpful for us, either like working in the industry or starting out in the industry. And so for today's segment, we have Sabrina Foldi, who will go into more of her background and details in just a sec. So yeah, she's a multiple featured grad of the school. She has done great demo reels with us, and also was able to leverage those to work a contracted EA as well. So yes, thanks for coming, and here's Sabrina.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Leonard. And yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. I'm really excited to do this. As Leonard said, I'm a technical sound designer. I'm based in Burnaby, BC. And I think I've been working with sound in some form for the past 20 years or so. I initially got into game audio because I was interested in sound design since my teens. Back then, sound design wasn't really a term, so I think what I was interested in was interactive audio, creating worlds with sound and soundscapes. And that came from my love of electronic music, and I was working with that a lot. I grew up in Victoria, and when I was studying at UVic, I discovered their radio station, CFUV. And so I had my own radio show. I focused on electronic music. So I played house and techno, but I especially loved the creative work that I could do with layering ambience and soundscapes and sound effects and little things that I would record with my little tape deck at the time. So I would also go around and playing events doing this, and I co-hosted a weekly ambient night as well at a coffee house. So it was just tons of fun. So I wanted to build on that. So I moved to Toronto and studied at the Harris Institute for the Arts. I studied sound engineering. And after that, I got right into audio post. So I did music and sound effects for a little online animated series. And then I also did dialogue editing for the MTV production Undergrads, which is a sassy little animated series as well. But this thread of working with sound continued all throughout my life. I've been DJing and producing music as well, and I have music on a few platforms now. But I decided just a few years ago, how do I get from doing that to getting back on track to the interactive audio? So I went to some Vancouver sound designer meetup groups, and I highly recommend doing that if they ever come back to doing it in person. So they were at the VFS, and that's where I found out about this school. So I joined in 2019, and I've studied Wise, Fmod, and Unity. I'm currently studying Unreal, and my demo reels have been really well received. And I won that featured grad award twice, which was amazing. And I think it really paid off, like Leonard said. I got to work at EA Games recently as an audio artist in speech, working on NHL 22, and that just came out last week. So I'm really stoked about that, and really proud of the whole team's work on that. So what I want to do today is show you what my approach was to making those demo reels. So the first thing I think is the hugest thing to look at is, what do you want to showcase? What did you do in your game sound design that made you really excited about doing that project? And what did you do really well at? And also consider, what are the skills out there right now that are really hot? So coding. So let's say in Unity and Unreal, did you get to do any coding for your implementation? I really recommend adding that to your demo reel. In terms of length, I would say 5 minutes or so. You really want to keep the audience engaged and keep what you're presenting really focused and clear. So with that in mind, I'd say you should really do separate demo reels for music, separate one for sound effects, and even a separate one for gameplay, so your audience can just get immersed in what you've created, and you don't have your voiceover going, or your text on screen saying how you implemented something. Just give them some really good gameplay content, and they can really get into the sound design that you made. So again, with keeping it entertaining, I think you want to create a flow that's going to work. So what I always think of is what's my most interesting content or the most exciting stuff that's going to grab the audience. I like to start with that. And then I'll have the middle section, which is like the filler, but still your good stuff. But there's a hierarchy of what's interesting. And then I would end with the second most interesting content. So it ends with something really engaging. And for the narration, I recorded my own voice. I know some people choose to do text on screen, but I just felt that going with my own voiceover was my natural way of being creative with it. So for my voiceover, for the narration rather, I think it's important to start with a really solid intro, like your name, why you chose to work on this game, what your sound design concept was for this game, what were your general recording techniques, did you use sample libraries, did you edit all of your samples, did you create all of your samples from scratch, how did you design them, and then you'll want to have descriptions for everything you want to showcase. So I recommend writing all of that out ahead of time. And then write your outro. So again, you'd have your name and maybe thanks for watching and something like that. I think my style was to keep it all sounding very, very friendly and grateful. That was just my way of doing it. And then again, with keeping organized and keeping a good flow, it's great to have what you want to present into categories. So all of your ambience you want to show, your footsteps, your impacts, maybe monster sounds. Group them all together, and then you present them in that way that's the most interesting. Another really important thing, and I'm so much about organization, create an asset list for your demo reels, for the actual video that you're putting together, the same way that you would for doing your sound design for the game. So I used a spreadsheet that was based off of the template that Leonard provided that's used for the sound design demos. And so I just had all of my assets in there that I needed for everything I wanted to showcase. And also with staying organized, really important to have these things organized on your computer. So your folder structure is super important. So for myself, I had like an assets folder and then subfolders for the videos I wanted to use, any audio I wanted to add as audio post later on, any images. Let's say I took maybe just some snapshots of some Foley. And then the file names, keep those as informative for yourself as possible. So I used file names like VO line 5s, that's my voiceover for line 5. And in my asset list, I knew that line 5 is where I'm talking about, let's say, footsteps. And then maybe gameplay line 5 would be another file name. Again, that's my gameplay for showing off the footsteps. Fmod line 5, and so on. It really helps with creating the storyboard later, which is something I do, and it really helps with doing the audio post work later as well, because you'll be pulling these extra files into that audio post portion of the demo creation too. So an example of the type of assets that you would want to think of if you want to showcase something would be, for example, footsteps. You might want to have a title card for your footsteps section. So your category is footsteps. Just have a card, some kind of visuals thing saying, okay, we're moving on to this next section. Boom, title card, footsteps. I like to also add some little sound effects when that visual prompt is up on the screen. So let's say, put your best recording of your footsteps there. Then you'll have your narration, which is your explanation for that section. You'll also want to set aside those Foley videos or pictures, as well as sound design videos to describe how the sounds were made. You'll want to have videos of the middleware or game engine work that you did, and again include the coding to show how you implemented your sounds. And then of course you want to show the final results, so your gameplay clips are going to be in there. You could also start with the gameplay clips and say, hey, here's the sounds I made in the game. You show those, and then you can say, okay, here's how I created those. So you can be creative with that flow, but you do want to have it make sense. So I prefer to go from start to finish. Here was my concept for the sounds. Here's how I made them and designed them and implemented them, and then here they are in the game itself. So for my narration, I recorded my voice, and then I did the noise reduction with Audacity. And I did something kind of sneaky, I think. I don't know if anyone else does this, but I use the length of each description to determine how long the corresponding video or videos should be. Let's say my narration for the footsteps takes 12 seconds. I know I need at least that much visual content for that period of time. But I highly recommend having way more visual content than your voiceover, because you don't want that voiceover masking what you're trying to showcase. You want to have room later on, especially in the audio post phase, to even move your voiceover waveform around so it's not covering up, let's say, the explosion that you're describing. That would be the worst case scenario, as no one can actually hear the thing you're describing. So yeah, you want to have way more video material than voiceover material. And then for my storyboard, this is where I put all of those visual assets together. I'm on a PC running Windows 10, and it comes with Windows Photos. So it's this free editor I can use. It's really simple. There's a lot out there, I think, that you can use to just, put a little storyboard together. And that's what I did. I just popped those all together. And again, because I'm using these file names that are really descriptive, I was able to quickly put that storyboard together in order so that all the visual content for that stuff was all in the right place. And then was the audio post work that I did. So from the Windows Photo program, you can export that as an MP4, and then I imported that into Ableton. That's what I just chose to use. It's the DAW that I've been using, I guess, the most in my life now. Yeah, so that worked really well. So I imported that into Ableton. And then in that, I add my voiceovers, my sound effects for those title cards, any little music stingers I might have written. Like, let's say you're doing your music demo and you're going to be talking about how you designed ambient. You might have your ambient title card come up, and then you might have a little excerpt of what it is that you're going to be showcasing. Or you could even start your ambient there and let it continue into your description part of it. But I think when you have, a title card go up, it's important to have some kind of sound element to go with it. So yeah, you have your voiceovers, your stingers for the title cards, any background music, all of that gets placed for myself into Ableton. And then ducking is very important so that your voiceover is always on top. Because again, you're going to have these explosions and crashes or even UI elements that you might want to describe. You want to make sure that while your voiceover is always on top, that these other elements do get the chance to be showcased, because that's what this is all about. Adjusting volumes is really important as well. Maybe doing some light EQing as well is really important there. So it's like doing a second sound design project, really. And then from there, I export that as an MP4 and then post that on YouTube. So that's really the short of how I've been putting them all together. But I think I've made 6 demos now, and I tell you, every time I do one, there's always something I learn, and then I do it differently next time.
Yeah.
So a big one for me, a big learning, was about time management. So if you can organize your asset list in a way that shows you where in the game the sound effects are that you want to showcase, that is awesome, because then you could do a gameplay clip. You could set it up so that let's say all the sounds I want to showcase in this section, let's say, are in the cave in this level. Then you can just go to that part in your game, record your clip of you playing all around in that cave, and you get to showcase all those sounds. And then later on, you can edit that video so that you have these separate clips placed into all the right categories: footsteps, sound effects, ambient, UI. So the first mistake I made, I think it was with my Wise demo, was I was like, okay, I want to get the monster bite sound. So I would start up the game, record myself, just go in and get some monster bite sounds and the recording, edit that, and then I have to go in again and do the next type of sounds, and then again and do the next type of sounds. And it really leaves you vulnerable, first of all, to just the the things of playing the game. You might get killed by an enemy when you're actually trying to get a gameplay clip of winning. So these sort of things will slow you down. So yeah, be prepared to just try to organize your assets and help you know where to go in the game to get those sound effects. And with video editing, that's something as well that I just do with that simple program, the Windows Photos program.
Wow.
So it's really easy stuff. Um, Also, with recording your Foley, try to do the recordings or the pictures of you doing the Foley as you're doing them. It's much harder to go back and say, okay, now I'm doing my demo. How do I set the stage again to do the footsteps? Where am I
Mhm.
gonna, how is this gonna look realistic? Am I even gonna be creating the footsteps that I did in the game? So
Mhm.
yeah, if you can do all of that right at the get-go, even your implementation videos, if you can be prepared to, I use OBS Studio to record my implementation videos. If you can record them while you're actually doing it the first time, amazing. That's
Mhm.
the fastest way to do it. Um, Another thing that I learned with doing the demos is the human element is really important. I think it's a really nice balance to have some pictures of yourself doing the Foley, maybe even playing an instrument. I think it's a really nice balance.
Mhm.
And one thing I think I'll go back and do differently or will update is my title cards, even
Mm.
the ones that are maybe in between in the game. Maybe give them a bit more of a visual element instead of just text. And
Right.
I think this might be most important for just your start card, the main one. So I was thinking of putting like an image of the game in there, and then my text, Sabrina Foldi, this is what I am, here's my website. Um, yeah, I think it's more eye-catching instead of text because it's like when you make a resume. I mean, you might be great at what you do, but you really have to stand out in terms of how you're presenting yourself as well as being great at what you do.
Mm.
So that goes for these demo reels very much.
Mhm.
Another thing with the implementation videos, it's really important to make it easy for your audience to understand what it is that you're looking at on the screen. So let's say you have a
Yeah.
program like Wise filling your screen. You can't do a screen capture of the whole thing. And
Yeah.
expect that your audience is going to see where your mouse is moving, or even if you have that one that has the highlighter on it, see where
Mhm.
you're clicking. It's just too difficult.
Mhm.
And some people are looking at your demos on small devices. It might even be a cell phone, unfortunately. So zoom in on things. It's something that I can do with OBS Studio. I just blow up a section of the screen. It's also worth it to try and resize the different windows. Like in a program like Unity, you can resize all these different windows so you can move things closer together. So if I'm talking about a prefab and I can have the elements in that prefab smushed beside it, so I can show all of that in one screen, and it's really nice and visible and clear. So that's really important. It's a big lesson.
Mhm.
And then at the end of the game demo, I think it's really nice to give it a sense of closure, just like the game would. So I like to end the demo with maybe the player dying or the player winning
Mm.
or the player moving on to the next level. So
Yeah.
it's a nice little tie up. Yeah, and so that's really all the tips that are super general on how I made these things and just the way that I did it. There's probably many ways out there, and each time I'm learning and growing. And yeah, I hope that you found something interesting in that and helpful that can help you present your work.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I'd be happy to answer any questions about
Yeah,
that.
so what I'll
Mhm.
do is I've got a whole bunch of questions. So I'm going to ask a few questions. And what we can also do is for those that are joining us live, in sort of the side on the Discord, there is the live event, which we're in, and then there's a live event chat, and then you can ask your questions in the live event chat, and I'll go in there in a sec, and then I know I'll ask Sabrina the questions there. So yeah, thanks. That's great. It's very it's like you have a very refined process at this point because you've done like so many of them and you've learned different things with each time you've iterated on it. And it's nice to see that you're also very it just comes through in your work that you're looking to iterate and basically do the kaizen, like Japanese, like, refinement process, which each time you go through it, and it comes through in the result because it's just, so it's definitely possible for people to just go like, oh, I just did this thing, and then, to continue doing it the same way. But yeah, I think also part of it is that, those reels were done over a sequence of time too. So like, um, each of our courses takes about 2 months, but also like, you weren't necessarily like rushing through everything just to be like, oh, I need to get the demo reel done and this, and then I just get that, and then the next thing. It's like what really came through in it is that you're learning that, what you need to at the time, and then like, basically reflecting that information in the reel. And yeah, it's nice to see like all this stuff about, like, I was going to ask you like, what program do you use, and then it's just like, Audacity, and then like, the Windows photo program. It's just like, that's awesome, because the thing is that we as audio folk, and maybe computer people in general, we think that we need the tools. It's just like, oh, I can't edit video unless I have Adobe Premiere or whatever, like, hundreds of dollars of programs. And it's like, no, actually, like, OBS is fine. I use the free version of Resolve, DaVinci Resolve, for video editing. Using Ableton is great. I have a copy of Ableton, but I've for me, my own process, I've moved more so to using Reaper, which is a similar sort of audio DAW. And yeah, just using the noise reduction in Audacity is great, because that, it's a typical thing that was just like, oh, how do you do noise reduction? It's like RX, and it's just like, yes, RX is possible, and I use the cheaper one. I don't use the whatever advanced, like the latest and greatest or whatever it is. But yeah, it does the job. And I've also done a lot of stuff, yeah, like in both noise reduction in Reaper or in Audacity. Yeah, and congrats on the release of the game. You somehow snuck that through me. I didn't I didn't see it on Twitter, so.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, that's right. Very excited.
Yeah, so yeah, I'll help
Yeah.
promote that through the school's social media channels. So yeah, I like the
Amazing.
idea of what you said, shares about naming convention, and yeah, what a lot of people have said for doing your demo reel, like especially like, I would say that one of the formats that I'm approaching with the school is to sort of do to split the idea of like, there's like the more long form demo reel, where it's just like, this is where it's more about you presenting yourself and your work and explaining, the hows and whys behind it. And that's, I feel like that's the reels that you've done, and those are great because it gives you an idea of, more of who you are as a person with your voice and the connection like that. But what I'm also suggesting for students to do these days is to do like a really short, like 1 or 2 minute like reel, which is primarily just audio, and to use title cards. Because what can happen is that sometimes studios they just have like a ton of reels to go through, and they even look at something between 5 to more minutes, and they're like and they're trying to figure out how to skip through it because they have so many to go through. So yeah, like I personally like the so-called longer ones because it's just more like, human. But I'm also
Mm.
trying to respond to what people are saying online and stuff. So it's I'm just saying, for there you can do both of those sort of approaches, and I think both are definitely fine, because most of
Yeah.
the reels that are done by the school are not the short ones. But I'm sort of nudging students these days to sort of try to do that, really just the super highlight, like, feature one thing and then basically explain, like, explain, like, but not like in words, like how you did it. Like, basically it's like a thing and then a breakdown of how it was put together. Yeah, and I think, well, I have a question for you about, like, sample libraries, because I didn't feel like you used a lot, like, in your work. What was kind of your approach there?
Yeah, it's interesting, like, I found a lot of free ones.
Hmm.
Um, I don't think I've actually yeah, for music, I've purchased some, but there are so many free ones out there. what's one of them that I've been using a lot? Beslian Studios, I think
Mm,
is the name of one.
mhm,
Um, that was a big one that I like to use. But when I knew to use a sound effects library, it's like if it was something that I couldn't create, um, what's a good example of something? There was a type of like a jet blast sound that I wanted to add to one of my explosions. So I had created all of the high end stuff, and I wanted this other like just this like windy like kind of thing underneath it. So that's a sort of time when I would use a sound effects library as one of my layers. So yeah, that was really the difference between me going to, record something, do some Foley work and think, okay, I got to search for this online. Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I really highly encourage students to minimize the use of library because um, what can happen in games and also in whatever audio post is that if you don't present yourself as like a sound designer, then there are actually separate roles, which are sound editors, which there are people that just take library sounds and like cut them to picture or cut them for the game. And so
Right.
I think it's really important to show that you're doing a creative sound design, like doing the hard things like monster sounds or magic or, sci-fi kind of effects, those kind of things. And to be able to put like personality into those sounds and really to know the recording process and to know how to layer and mix and master and, make sure that it's implemented properly in the game because that's I think that's a huge part of what companies are looking for, and that's also something like you said about the implementation side and the coding side is really important because yeah, like it's like as far as on the sound designer side, like the salaries these days between games and film, like AAA games, Hollywood budgets as far as sound design as our salaries are really similar. So you have a lot of people that are coming over to games primarily because you can actually be like salaried, as a sound designer. Whereas most of the time in film, it's a company that just basically they get commissioned to do stuff and they get hired and they're brought in at the last minute. That's why it's audio post, and then they just have to shove their stuff in there and you miss out on a huge part of the creative process of being there at the design at the beginning. And yeah, with games, I think, you need to be able to do the implementation side. And I found that I really similarly nudge students towards that. And I'm really, happy with the way that you've adapted and like really gotten into the technical side of things. So one question that I have for you is like, say, with the Unity course, like, how did you dig into like, I assume you're not a programmer, I don't know, but I assume you didn't do a lot of like C# programming before that course. And like, how did you find that process?
Yeah, that's a really good question. In university, I took a course in C. And I took some logic courses as well, but I was kind of dabbling back then and wondering, what to do. And I was also, had the whole radio show thing going on that was super exciting. So in sort of discovering, okay, what I want to do with my life, I dabbled in some programming stuff back then. And then more recently, I did a bit of work on the side as a junior web developer. So I've worked a little bit, with web coding, like
Mhm.
HTML, a little bit of Java. And then recently I just looked at a little bit of Python, especially when I was, getting ready for interviews with companies like EA. They would ask, do you have Python? So I'd be like, okay, yeah, I looked at that the other day. Like,
Mhm.
so just looking at code and getting familiar with it and stuff. So with regards to the Unity course, um, the logic of it made sense. The layout of code makes sense. Its place in the program made sense to me. So um, I think where it got overwhelming was just before I had to actually go in and do my own implementation work with the code. Before actually getting in there and getting my hands on it, it just felt like this sort of just this new unwieldy tool. But that's just me. That's how things
Hmm.
feel to me until I can actually get in there myself.
Hmm.
So if I just know something academically, it's a little worrisome, but when I can really see that, oh, okay, I can tweak this and this in the code, and it does this, or I can add this kind of code so that the ambience will fade in and out beautifully as the player moves between zones. That's awesome. So I think that was actually my favorite part, actually, with the coding, is creating those ambient zones and having the music fade in and fade out, and it's like being a DJ. So
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was a ton of fun. But yeah, but one piece of advice to anyone working, through coding with the school is ask Leonard as soon as you get stuck. I have a bad habit of struggling a bit too long on
Hmm.
my own. But that's just, my thoughts. So I'll, work on it for a while and maybe too long, and then finally ask Leonard for help. But you're in a learning phase. You're not going to know, and this is when you have Leonard as a resource. So ask him. So yeah.
Yeah, I oddly enough, in a certain way, like I mean, obviously, I do education these days, but yeah, my background is actually in programming. So I have an honors in comp sci, and then my minor is in music. So it's more, sort of more on the tech side, yes, and a little bit less on the, whatever creative side. And I guess actually, like, well, technically, I have a master's in game audio now, but my focus in the past, I started out doing game audio coding, like back in the early '90s at EA here. And then I got to a point where I was just like, it's creative, but it was also like I didn't feel like I had the creative freedom that I wanted. So then I worked more in actual like creative coding. So I worked doing some interactive stuff with this basically like with the BAM Center on the project, and then other sort of art-based things doing programming. And then, yeah, I started doing the education thing back in 2001. So it's over 20 years ago at this point. And what I did like with that is that I could, I could basically program things for students. And I actually find that really fun because I don't really have to spend a lot of time making it all super pretty and maintaining it like I do even on the eco game now. Like I need to, I submit stuff and then the coders are just like, no, 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 you got to do it like this, like all the style guides and stuff. And to me, that's not like the super fun part of coding. I like to be, I think it's okay to be a little bit messy. And that's part of the reason why I like working in pure data. Like working in C sharp, I find it very, like immediate. So once again, like, yeah, it's great. I was honestly like, really just stoked to see the work that you had done on the coding side of things, because I'm just like, yeah, you're totally getting it from the fact of like really understanding how the code works and then using it for creative purposes for things that you can't do without code, which a lot of people, they just don't get to that point. And so for yourself, that really separates you from the rest of the herd. And for the people listening, I do highly recommend getting into the sort of the deeper, trickier parts of doing technical audio implementation for, like games, which includes like scripting, coding, C sharp. Python is really good to learn. C++, that's more of a game audio coder thing. Like if you really want to get into programming, and if you want to be like a game audio coder, you will have a job for life. That's one of the one of the things that I've been fortunate with is that, I started out that way. And like, if you look for jobs these days, almost every company would be happy to have an extra game audio coder.
Wow,
Yeah.
that
So
is
it's,
gold.
yeah. But on the flip side of that, then like, we're also talking on the creativity side. And that's part of the reason why I really like the school is that I like, whatever. I like helping people. I like being, connecting with people, and I find that a lot of the times in larger companies with doing coding, it's not as easy, basically. It's just not as much of a thing. So yeah, yeah. But yeah, thanks for saying that, as far as the school is able to, like, I really, that's one of the things that is, I think, a real selling point of the school, because you can definitely take like a, whatever, like a Udemy course, or even sometimes like like university courses, and you can get stuck. And because of the size of the class, you can't necessarily be like, oh, hey, I have a bug with my program, and submit it to somebody who will actually be able to give you appropriate feedback and fix the issue. So I feel pretty confident that I'm able to fix most issues that students have that are, say, like not specific to their machine, but to do with the actual coding side of things. So anyways, just saying that, yeah, I'm very happy to help anybody. And we have specific coding add-ons with the courses to help with even more detail with that for people that want to dig into it. Doug and other folks, Doug Walters and other people have really, taken advantage of that side of things. But the Unity course deals with C#. And that's I've had a lot of people. There was just the sign up day was yesterday for the November-December term, and there's a lot of people asking about like doing scripting, which I think is a good approach of looking for work. And then on the Unreal side of things, visual scripting with blueprints is really, really important, because at EA they use a tool called Frostbite, which is a visual scripting tool for the sound design, not for, I don't think, for speech, and you probably can't talk about that anyways. But yeah, it's Frostbite is like something that gets used a lot, and same thing at EA, and same thing for Rockstar Games. They use a system called AMP, which is a visual scripting system. Guerrilla Games over, I think, in Denmark, they also use visual scripting. A lot of companies use Python. So yeah, these are helpful things to learn. And obviously, Unreal itself, now we're getting more capabilities of doing implementation with not just blueprints, but with meta sounds with Unreal 5 coming out, which is pretty exciting.
That's
Anyways,
great. I can't wait to learn more about that.
yeah, so what I'll do is, once again, for folks that are joining us live, feel free to ask questions. I will have a quick look here and see if people... Oh, okay, great. We do have questions here. Okay, so the first one that we have is... Okay, all right. So this is from Anthony. Hey Sabrina, thanks for taking the time to do this. What advice would you give for developing a script for your voiceover?
Yes. You have to make it clear, make it interesting. And if you can you write it like it's actually a story? Like again, starting with an intro, that includes your whole concept for how you did the sound design. What were you thinking of? I think that's a really rich part of the demo, and how you can convey what you were thinking, because I think, especially if you want to get a creative role down the road, you have to show that you can be trusted with your decision making. What are your instincts creatively? So if you can speak about that, that's really important. As for the rest of the script, I'd say to have a step-by-step approach is really important. I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this. And one way to check that you haven't missed anything in the content of what you're writing is to actually see if you can follow the steps that you have spoken about, the steps that you wrote, and see if just by following that you do actually get from A to B. Because you can find that when you know something, it might be hard to talk about it. There'll be gaps in how you explain it, because you're thinking, oh, of course this, of course this. So you have to remove the of courses and think about that in a lot of detail. How is it that you did this implementation? Where did you click on the screen? Or how is it that you layered the sounds to create this explosion? How is it that they fit together and they don't all mask each other and sound muddy? Where did you EQ and why? To really write out the detailed steps is really important. But then you want to edit that, because the first time I wrote my script for my Wise demo, I think my demo was about 10 or 12 minutes long. So you can't have a demo that long. At least that wasn't my goal at the time. I wanted to keep it, short and sweet and usable. Yeah, so it's a tricky thing in a way, because if you're coming at this with, you know, game audio or music or sound effects in mind, writing the script for the narration is a whole other skill set. just like for myself, doing any video editing was a whole other skill set. But luckily, there's a really simple program that's free that I own. Um, One thing you could do is you could maybe write your script and have it, reviewed by a friend of yours who's really good at writing, really good at editing. Yeah, you could sort of outsource it or even have a friend write it for you. If they understand a bit of what you're doing, or if you can speak with them about what you did, and then they can write down those steps and they can write the script for you, that could be really useful as well. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. That's the advice of basically following the steps that you've said is seems simple, but it's something I can't remember. There's a specific psychological term for that. I don't think it's called asymmetric knowledge, but it's basically the idea that you know what you know, but it's hard to unknow what you know. So basically,
Yeah.
as a teacher and as a presenter of what you're working on, that can be a real challenge. I find that the first thing that I find with demo reels that I think is sort of a stumbling spot is where people explain. They go like, and then I clicked, like on this part of the wise window, and then I clicked here, and then I moved this over here. And it's like, you know, most of the time your audience is going to be experienced, like if you're looking for work, it's going to be people that are experienced in game audio, and they're not looking for like how to really, like, did you use random containers or like switches or whatever it is. It's more saying like, this is what I was thinking of from a creative standpoint, and these are sort of like the tools that I used, and we know that I went through the steps. And I think that when you explain like your creative process, that's important, because it's like, this is the reason why I did this, and then I did this for this reason, then I did this for this reason, and then it's like, oh, okay, because it's not something that you can get from, say, like that, a quick, if you're not doing a voiceover or a script where you show the steps, it doesn't give you the why. And I think that that's part of the point of making like a reel that has like a lot more description in it. And yeah, the script of where you describe steps that are actually possible to complete, because sometimes you just, if it's really, because, and also when you're learning stuff, it's right in your forefront of your head, and you're just like, oh, I learned this thing, and that's really exciting, so I'm going to put it in there. And then, but sometimes that particular thing is like, it's just assumed. And so when I give feedback on it, I'm like, yeah, that particular thing is just simply like a step in a regular process. But like when you were describing like why you did that, or like how you recorded that sound, that's awesome. And so it's sort of like that gentle process of like, yeah, let's show what you did and why you did it. But yeah, that script advice is great. I really like that. That's cool. Cool. Let's go to another question. Jump into the chat. Okay, so this is from Jordan. So thank you, Sabrina. I'm curious about your workflow for the NHI title. Were you working with Wise? Also, are you studying Unreal in response to a need you've seen in your paid projects, or just looking to build your skill set? So on this one, I'll preface it by saying that, basically be careful about, what you're able to say as far as the details. But I think that I know that it's general knowledge that EA uses Frostbite, but I'm not sure that their speech tool, if they have one, is public. So I'm just saying to preface that. But as far as the other tools that you use, like if you used a DAW and stuff like that, I'm just saying maybe you can explain that process as much as you feel comfortable explaining it, and then also the related question about Unreal.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So when I was working at EA, I was doing the speech editing. And so it actually felt like I was doing dialogue editing for TV or for film. My role was very, it was isolated to just that thing. So I actually wasn't even doing any implementation with Frostbite. I wasn't actually using any of the speech tools. It was very focused on just the editing. So my world was completely in Pro Tools, and we used the isotope tools quite a bit for the noise removal, so the clicks, the pops, that sort of thing. And so a regular day for me would be, if I hadn't received the files from the recording session yet, they'd be, getting recorded with the talent. Then they would come to me. I would take the either the audio files that were recorded by the talent, or I would take an entire Pro Tools session, depending on how they had set it up that day. And I would just dive right in and just edit. And usually I would be given about 3 hours of material to edit in one go. And then I would pass that off to the lead speech person who would review that. If there are any issues, they get sent back, and then there's more fixes. And then once that is okayed, then it gets passed on to mastering, and then it gets passed on to implementation and so on. So I was one very focused part of that whole speech workflow. But I tell you, I loved doing that kind of precision work, being a sonic surgeon and cleaning up the audio. I really love that kind of stuff. And it really taught me how to do that kind of precise work, but also quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to keep up with the workflow. So
Mm-hmm.
time management was really important. So I hope that answers your questions with the EA stuff, but let me know if you have any others. For Unreal, I knew that Unreal was a big gateway to working on VR or AR projects. I researched that before I joined the school. Um, I knew right off the bat when I joined that I wanted to take all 4 courses. Um, I just thought it would be a really great way for me to understand what's going on in the world, who's using these game engines and why, and what do they all feel like, and the middleware as well. So Unreal was sort of like my thing I've always been looking towards, because I would just love to create fully immersive environments with virtual reality.
Mm-hmm.
And if I could work on a project that has some kind of an educational focus or a health focus, that would be fantastic. So that's my long, far off dream. And I think Unreal, in my opinion, I still feel like a student of it, but I think it's one of the most powerful programs for doing that. It's being used in so many applications, like, architecture and automotive, um, broadcast TV, film. Yeah, there's so many possibilities with that program. So I'm really excited to see how I can apply myself with it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. It's deep. And now with, yeah, once again with meta sounds, it's that's I'm having to basically like rejig the course because of that, because they're phasing out sound cues. That's kind of the old way of doing it, and then that'll just be replaced with meta sounds, and there'll be still some blueprint stuff to do. Those like blueprints exist sort of alongside of metasounds. Metasounds is kind of like the DSP, like the digital signal processing side of things, whereas the logic stuff would more so be done in blueprints. And yeah, it's exciting. There's a lot of stuff happening. So procedural audio stuff, and yeah, I like that you brought in that we don't necessarily just have to be doing interactive audio for games. And that's sort of the way that I've come from things as well, is that I started, I was doing stuff with like dance or theater, and also of course with games, but looking at it from yeah, like literally like a holistic perspective, like what are some modern tools that we can use to, in a sense, like address like either creative, but then also like you're saying, like educational or like health topics, and with this very powerful like interactive medium. And yeah, Unreal is a great platform for doing that. So yeah, it's cool that it's doing interactive audio is not just games. So yeah, cool. I'll look for another question here. Okay, so great. So I think Jordan needed to duck out. He's got a gig. So thanks, Jordan. And this is from Mark. So he says, I really appreciate your advice on time management. Adding on to Anthony's question, do you write your whole script out first and then record the full voiceover in one session? Or do you piece together different snippets of voice recordings and lay it out after the fact?
Ah, that's a good question. Yeah, I do record it all at once. That is the goal, because if you ever have to go back and record a section again, it's really hard to match the room tone, your own expression, so many things. Even if I go and record it in the exact same place in my home here, there will be differences. It's really tricky. I had that as one of my big challenges with my Unity demo, actually. Um, yeah, and I fought so hard to not have to go back and re-record it. I thought, oh, maybe I can just EQ this,
Mm,
or maybe something, but no, it didn't sound right. So I did a re-recording of it, and it was a little better, but I could still hear the difference
mm,
between, the one sentence. It still bugs me. Um, but yeah, I do write the whole thing from top to bottom, and then I do look at it a few times and try and cut it down. And like what Leonard said, is I'll try to remove any details that are just uh, too minute, too specific. Yeah, so if I can write it all at once and I can really see where the bulk of my narration is as well, I can see like, oh wow, I'm talking forever about, this thing X, and it's actually getting kind of boring as I read it. So I can, cut into that section, edit that out, make it more sleek, make it more interesting. So that's really the advantage of doing it all in one go. Write it all in one go, try to record it all in one go. But as you're recording it, say the line a few times with some space in between it. So then that allows you to get the best take, and you're still in that same recording environment. Um, so yeah, I wish I did more of that. Um, And then also, making sure that you have good, like a windscreen on the mic, you're a good space away from the mic, and that way you're not going to pick up so many of the speech artifacts, and you won't have to do much cleaning after the fact as well. But yeah, I do it all in one go. Yeah.
mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, that was something that was interesting because when listening to the reel at the time, it is one of those things where I could feel like, oh, because you asked specifically about it, and I'm like, if I pull at this thread might come out for a while. It's like unraveling the whole sweater. And yeah, it is one of those things where, you know, for us as audio professionals, we can hear it. We can hear that. And unfortunately, that's exactly the kind of person that's going to be listening to the reels as well. So, basically having a high level of, being particular is very important because that is one of the things that comes through in doing the voiceover and the narration for the reel, is not just that it's like, presenting yourself as, to add personality to it for the listener, but then also to show that you know how to do dialogue production, that you understand, like the recording principles that are required to get like clean dialogue that's like, that works well from a technical level, but then also works well on the, basically like on the presentation level as far as acting and the emotion and the pacing and those kind of things. So like you say, if you can like record sections with slightly different pacing, I mean, that's getting into like, quite detailed dialogue production techniques that I know that I have never done that. I tried to sort of go through things in one go, and then I'm just like, eh. And honestly, that's one of the reasons why with the schools videos, like the ones that we put on both on Twitter and then also with the course, I do my best to avoid not having like, whatever my head box in the corner, partially because that's extra video production that needs to get done, like lighting, costuming. I don't do makeup at this point, but I don't have to do hair. But it's all those things are things that, yeah, like I basically try to, in those videos I reduce those things, and I often will do like a little bit of a sort of a little bit of a script, but also what sometimes what I do at the school is a bit more quick and dirty, where I'm just like, look, I'm gonna do like an OBS edit, and then I'll just, edit out all the stuff that I can to make it as sort of as short as possible, and then add titles to organize it. And then if I really miss something, then I'll go back and like redo it. But video takes so much time. And so like what you're saying with the dialogue production, that's a great way of trying to cut down on the possibility of having to re-record and then trying to recreate your, emotional state and your voice, like the timbre of your voice, the proximity, you know, all the different things, so that you can like punch into like a dialogue edit. Like I honestly don't know how like ADR folks do it, but like that's amazing. Like doing dialogue
Yeah.
production, and I often have I honestly have stayed away a lot from dialogue. The last dialogue work that I did was really on NHL, and I think that was like like over 10 years ago. And it was already
Yeah.
like all recorded, so it was more just editing. But even so, it's so much work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's tremendous. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, let's see if we have, oh, we're getting almost to the hour. Let's see if we have any closing questions. Oh, okay, we have one more question here. So, this is from Viral, and hey, Sabrina, would love to know more about your typical workday working at EA. Do you receive an asset list to work with? What are the deadlines? Essentially, I'm trying to understand what working for a triple A, like game company is like.
Ah, that's a good question. Yeah, when I was working there, everyone was working from home. So that was a big part of how our day went. So we were doing a lot of staying in touch with Slack, with emails. Um, and in terms of the day, a couple days a week, we'd have a stand up where we'd all talk about what we're doing that day. And then we'd share if we had any questions or needed any help with anything, or if we found a solution for something that was super cool, and we'd share that. And then after that, it was just work, just head down and edit dialogue and keep going. And just, it was very, very repetitive, very precise and detailed. And that was really what it was like for me. It might be different if you're working actually in the physical, studio with them, but working from home, yeah, you can feel really, really siloed. So
Hmm.
staying in touch with people on Slack was a big thing, especially with the onboarding. If there are any issues with the software, or getting any of the game built on my machine or something, yeah, staying in touch with people over Slack was a big deal. But yeah, the days were quite the same, uh,
Yeah.
Monday to Friday, except for having the stand-ups. We also would meet with our manager, like, every 2 weeks or so as a check-in, and mine was fantastic. That was a real joy. Yeah, it's, you feel like you're a part of a machine. And if that's your jam, if that's what you like to do, you're the worker, you're the creator, then I think it's a great place to be, and you can really hone your skills with that repetition. Um, I think that was really cool. I really appreciated that. Yeah, if you can get a gig there, I highly recommend it. I think it's a fantastic environment. They have a lot of great perks for employees, even when you're working from home. Um, yeah, yeah, it was a great joy. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, well, I'll say that the global video game market has never been bigger, in my experience, of working in it for 25 years. Like, I've never seen this amount of jobs be available. So, for people that are coming through the school at this point, the timing is great, as far as like opportunities. There's just, like publicly traded companies like, EA and other big game companies. you know, as they've been releasing stuff during the pandemic, most like game companies, because like people have been staying at home and like spending, instead of like traveling or doing service type stuff, they've been buying video games because they want to have like an experience that's fun that they can do at home. And so there's been a lot of money going into games, and like so the game companies are like still like just bursting at the seams with like, you know, like that they need to get more content out there, and they need to get more people like, you know, in the seats making games. And like even just it seems like, at least in North America, like the job market is also like it is very favorable towards you know, you can pick and choose a bit more than you could before, especially for people that are like entering into something, which is, yeah, it just hasn't happened like this before. So it's I don't know, it's exciting to watch, I guess, from the sidelines. I'm not looking to, you know, find work myself, but I'm very happy to see, you know, students getting work. There's gosh, I mean, I put out the, you know, the community updates, the email. So if you haven't signed up for that, you can sign up for that on the website. But like through all those, I try and highlight people that have just been getting work. And like there has been a lot of people that are like contacting me saying like, oh, hey, I got a contract here, I got a job here. And it's very cool to see that there's a lot of opportunity, because when working with the school and, you know, whatever, when I tell people that, you know, I run a school, and it's like, oh yeah, I teach people like audio stuff. Oh, what kind of audio? Well, for video games. And then some people can be just like, oh, well, you know, aren't you just flooding the industry? And it's like, well, right now I can honestly say, like, in sure, I'm flooding it like with great students that are landing at great places, because there's a lot of opportunities out there. So I don't know, I think I'm just very happy, yeah, obviously, to chat with you, Sabrina, and find out how your experience has been. And yeah, looking forward to seeing how things progress for you as a technical sound artist. And yeah, I'm, you know, obviously you're still working with the school. We're still, you know, doing the Unreal course. And yeah, like my goal with the school is to continue to help people through whatever stage in their career. So just know that for the people joining us, you know, they're all students, that, yeah, like just feel free to ask me questions about, you know, resume stuff, job stuff, all these kind of things, because I'm very happy to help out with the, you know, the background and the knowledge that I have of, you know, working in the industry for a while, but also seeing, you know, from other students, kind of what they're putting out there and what things are successful for them finding work in the industry. Yeah.
Yeah, and to add on that, I highly recommend asking Leonard to look at your resumes, look at your cover letters, even show him job descriptions that you're considering applying to. He is a fantastic coach that way. I really recommend staying in touch with him, even after you're done your course. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. Well, thanks so much, Sabrina. There, I have like so many notes from our chat, and yeah. Once again, I hope it's all recorded, and thanks so much for the folks that have joined and asking great questions. And yeah, it's just fun to be able to do these sessions and just, you know, basically continue to build community. It's fun. I really enjoy these sessions. So yeah, thanks, Sabrina. This has been awesome.
Thank you so much. I had a blast, and thanks everyone for coming today. I hope this really helped, and you can present your work in a super awesome way.
Nice. So what we'll do is that we'll sort of like head to the green room. So that'll be the live event chat channel. And in there, what we can do is that, Sabrina, you can post like a link to your website. We can post links to your demo reels, and also if there's any, you know, questions that you want to ask Sabrina, you know, sort of after this, then you can do it in the live event chat for a little bit. I think, you know, we'll do that for, you know, whatever, a few minutes, and see how things go. And once again, thanks. And yeah, if you're watching this recorded, you know, thanks for joining us. This has been a presentation by the School of Video Game Audio, so that's sovga.com. And yeah, thanks again for watching. Cheers.